I never expected a simple backyard fire pit to cause chaos, but when Karen from next door got involved, the whole neighborhood got a front row seat to the most unexpected showdown of the summer. It all started on a Saturday afternoon. The sky was clear, the grass freshly mowed, and the smell of marinated ribs floated in the air. I'd been planning this barbecue for over 2 weeks. Nothing fancy, just some friends, family, music, and a good old-fashioned fire pit to sit around after dark. Now Karen, our next-door neighbor, is the type who peeks out through the blinds, like it's a full-time job. She doesn't like noise, doesn't like laughter, doesn't like the smell of grilled anything, and especially doesn't like me. I don't know what I ever did to her. Maybe it was the time my dog accidentally dug a hole near her hydrangeas, or maybe it's just that I smiled too much for her liking. Either way, she was never happy, and I always tried to stay out of her way. But that night, that harmless fire pit became her hill to die on. It was around 5 p.m. when people started showing up. We had folding chairs set up in the yard, a table, loaded with burgers, wings, salad, and soda, and speakers playing easygoing tunes. Nothing too loud. Kids were running around with water balloons, dogs barking occasionally, just the usual summer fun. I had built the fire pit myself, a safe, clean ring of stones filled with gravel, placed a good distance from the fence, far enough from anything flammable. I even had a fire extinguisher nearby, just in case. But when Karen peeked her head over the fence and saw the flame flicker to life, she narrowed her eyes like I had just summoned the devil himself. At first, I tried to be polite. I waved, gave her a thumbs up as if to say, "It's all safe, no worries." She didn't wave back. She just disappeared into her house. I didn't think much of it. My cousin started playing the guitar. People sang along. The kids had sparklers. The fire crackled softly. It was exactly the kind of night I had hoped for. About 30 minutes later, I saw Karen again, but this time through the side gate. She had marched out of her house wearing her usual beige cardigan like armor, holding her phone high like a badge of honor. I was talking to a friend when I heard her voice. "You can't do this!" she shouted. "This is illegal!" I turned and smiled. "It's a backyard fire pit, Karen. Perfectly legal." She ignored me, holding the phone to her ear, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Yes. I'd like to report an open flame at 272 Oakwood. It's dangerous. There are children. There's no supervision. I don't feel safe." Everyone got quiet for a moment. You know the kind of silence that falls when something awkward happens and no one wants to react too fast? That was it. People exchanged glances. Some chuckled under their breath. I walked over to her, calm as ever. "Karen," I said, "the fire's contained. It's legal. We're not breaking any laws." She scoffed. "We'll see what the police have to say about that." And then she stormed back into her house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the siding. I turned to the group and said, "Well, looks like we might have some company." Everyone laughed. Some joked about hiding the ribs, others raised their drinks and toasted to Karen. But inside, I was a little uneasy. It's not that I was worried about the law. I had already checked my city's ordinances before I ever bought firewood. But the idea of police showing up at a family gathering still made me tense. About 15 minutes later, we heard it. A car pulling up. Not just any car, a patrol cruiser. It rolled to a stop in front of my house, and out stepped someone I hadn't expected at all. It was Chief Martinez. And here's the twist. Chief Martinez is not just our town's police chief. He's also my friend. In fact, he was invited to the barbecue, and not only that, he was already there. You see, Chief Martinez was the tall guy in the Hawaiian shirt standing by the cooler, holding a plate of brisket and sweet corn. When the cruiser pulled up, he raised his eyebrows, looked at me and said, "You expecting backup?" We both laughed, and he handed his plate to his teenage son. Another officer stepped out of the car, Officer Daniels, a young guy, maybe a year on the job. He looked around, clearly confused by the peaceful scene. A fire pit, people laughing, a guitar strumming in the background. Martinez walked toward him and said, "Evening, Daniels. Everything all right?" Daniels blinked. Sir? I was dispatched to check on a complaint. Open flame, possible hazard. Caller seemed pretty upset." Martinez nodded slowly. "Well, you found it. Looks like a fire pit to me." Daniels looked at me, then back at the fire, then at the kids chasing each other with balloons. "This is the complaint?" Martinez grinned. "Looks like it. And it's all up to code. I've seen it myself." Daniels hesitated. "So, should I write a report?" Martinez slapped him gently on the shoulder. "No need. I'll handle this one. Why don't you take a few minutes and grab a bite? I hear there's peach cobbler." Daniels looked surprised, but nodded. "Yes, sir." As the cruiser doors closed and Daniels wandered toward the food, Martinez turned to me. "Let me guess. Karen?" I sighed. "Bingo," he chuckled. "She's called us 6 times this summer, once for a cat in her bushes, once because someone's lawn had too many dandelions. This fire pit is probably the highlight of her week." Just then, we heard her voice again, this time from her porch. "Officer! Officer! You need to shut it down! That fire is a danger!" Martinez looked at her, raised his hand politely, and said, "Ma'am, I've inspected the scene. Everything is compliant. There's no reason to intervene." Karen stomped her foot. "But it's loud. And there are children. And it's smoke." "What about the smoke?" Martinez gestured to the gentle smoke rising straight up into the sky. "Barely a wisp, ma'am. I'm standing 10 feet from it and I smell more barbecue than wood." She turned red in the face. "So you're just doing nothing?" Martinez smiled. "Enjoy your evening, ma'am." And then, without another word, she slammed the door again. I turned to Martinez and said, "You want that cobbler now?" He laughed. "You read my mind." And just like that, the party went on. I paused, waiting for the sound of sirens, but the only thing I heard was the faint crackle of the fire and the occasional laugh from the backyard. My guests were still chatting, sipping drinks, enjoying burgers, completely unaware of the storm brewing at my front door. I took a deep breath and opened the door wide, expecting to see flashing lights or a patrol car pulled up to the curb, but instead, there was Karen, standing right at the edge of my lawn like she owned it. Arms crossed, lips tight, eyes narrowed, and posture stiff like she'd rehearsed this confrontation in the mirror all morning. She didn't waste time. Her voice launched into the air, sharp and high-pitched. "You are endangering this neighborhood. With that open flame! It's a violation of code!" I blinked. I hadn't even said hello. She waved a piece of paper in the air, some printed-out copy of an old neighborhood rule book that I knew hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. "And I've already called the police. You can't have a fire pit without a permit. This is a residential area." I raised my hand slowly, trying not to laugh. "Karen, it's a legal propane fire pit, and I'm well within regulations. We're not breaking any laws here." But she wouldn't hear it. Her voice got louder as she stepped closer. "You think you're above the rules? You think because you have friends over, you can turn this place into a bonfire festival? I've lived here 15 years, and right then the sound of gravel crunching cut her off. A black SUV pulled up in front of my house. Not a patrol car, no sirens, no lights, just a clean, sleek, city-issued SUV. The door opened, and out stepped the fire chief, Chief Daniels. He adjusted his sunglasses and looked around. A few neighbors had peeked out from their blinds. Karen's face shifted. Confusion, then recognition, then something like panic. He walked up the path calmly, and when he saw me, he smiled. "Hey, smells great back there," he said. "You got any of those jalapeno burgers left?" I nodded, chuckling a little. Karen's mouth opened slightly, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She took a step back. You called the fire chief?" she asked me, but her voice had lost all that edge now. Chief Daniels looked at her and raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, I'm here because your call came through dispatch. Thought I'd check it out personally since I was already in the area. Didn't know it was your BBQ," he said, nodding toward me. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Karen tried to regain control of the situation. But this fire pit, it's dangerous. There are kids around and the smoke," the chief cut her off, calmly but firmly. "I've known this man for years. His setup is safe, code compliant, and frankly, one of the better maintained backyard pits I've seen. There's no issue here. If you're concerned about smoke, you may want to consider shutting your windows instead of calling emergency services." Karen turned red. Not sunburn red, but pure embarrassment. You could feel her pride cracking. Her mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. "So you're not going to cite him?" she said. Chief Daniels gave her a look like he'd seen this type before. "No citation, no issue. But I will note that false or unnecessary emergency calls can result in a fine, ma'am, especially when there's no violation." That was it. Her face fell. She muttered something under her breath and stormed off down the sidewalk, arms swinging, like she was physically shaking off the humiliation. Chief Daniels turned back to me and grinned. "So, about that burger?" We laughed, and I led him to the backyard where my guests greeted him like an old friend, which he was. We'd coached together at the youth league for 2 years, and his daughter had even babysat for me once. The guy was more family than official. As he grabbed a plate and I handed him a soda, the mood returned to normal. The fire crackled gently. Kids were chasing bubbles. My uncle was deep into a story about fishing in the 80s, and I stood there, for a second just taking it all in. But inside I was thinking, how had it come to this? Karen had lived in the neighborhood longer than most of us, and for a while she'd been decent. Distant, sure, but not aggressive. Something had shifted in the past year. Maybe boredom, maybe loneliness. Or maybe she just felt like things were slipping out of her control, and the only way she could grab hold again was by asserting power, by creating conflict. I wasn't angry anymore, though. That moment she stood there thinking she had the upper hand, only for it to flip. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like clarity. I wasn't the bad guy. I wasn't out of line. She was just looking for a fight, and I wasn't going to be her opponent anymore. Still, the incident had stirred something in the community. That evening, after the fire pit had cooled and guests were heading home, my neighbor Dan came over, with his hands in his pockets. "Hey, man," he said. "I saw the whole thing. That was wild." We stood on the front porch and chatted. Then another neighbor walked by with his dog and nodded. "Heard about what happened. She's really pushing it, these days." One by one, folks who usually stayed quiet started speaking up. "She yelled at my daughter last week for riding her bike on the sidewalk. She called animal control on my cat. She left a note on our mailbox about how our porch light was too bright. It all came spilling out, the stories, the annoyances, the weird little power plays Karen had pulled on everyone. And suddenly, I wasn't alone." The next morning, I woke up to a surprise. On my porch was a folded piece of paper taped to a basket of fresh muffins. "Sorry about yesterday. You were right. Karen." I stared at it for a long minute. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just embarrassment. Maybe someone finally told her she was out of line. But whatever it was, she'd made a gesture. Did it erase the drama? No. Did it mean we were best friends now? Definitely not. But maybe it was the beginning of peace. Later that week, I got a message in the neighborhood group chat. Someone suggested organizing a block party, not an HOA thing, just neighbors getting together. Music, food, games for the kids. Casual, friendly. I volunteered to host, fire pit and all. This time, Karen didn't complain. She came, and she brought cookies. The chief stood quietly, holding his plate and glancing between Karen and me. The tension in the backyard could have been cut with a butter knife. Everyone had stopped eating. The kids paused mid-bite. My neighbor, who had just poured herself some lemonade, was now holding her cup mid-air, frozen. Even the dogs stopped barking. All eyes were on the two of them. Karen in her usual angry stance, arms crossed, lips tight, eyes locked onto the chief, and the chief standing there calm, collected, still chewing slowly. Then, after what felt like a full minute of silence, the chief finally swallowed and said in the calmest voice, "Karen, again?" That's when the laughter began. Not loud laughter, more like a collective chuckle from everyone who had been waiting to see how this showdown would unfold. It was the kind of laughter people let out when they feel relief, but also amusement. It wasn't mean. It was just real. Karen's face flushed red. Not just a little red, full red like tomato soup. She stammered, trying to find the words. This is a fire hazard. You can't just burn wood in the city like this. It's not allowed. There are codes." The chief calmly walked toward her, wiping his hands on a napkin still holding, his half-eaten plate of ribs in the other. "Karen, you called the station and told them your neighbor was burning down the neighborhood, that there were flames out of control and children were at risk. We rolled a unit because we thought this was serious. That's not just a complaint, that's a false report." She stepped back slightly, now realizing this wasn't going to go the way she thought it would. She looked around and suddenly noticed the police officers. Not just one, but two other officers had walked into the backyard and were now talking. To the guests, shaking hands, accepting a soda. One of them had grabbed a hot dog. "Karen," the chief said again, this time sterner, "this is a legal fire pit. It's contained. It's supervised. The grill isn't near any structure. There are no violations here." "But the smoke," she argued, trying to regain her footing. "It was drifting into my yard. I have allergies and asthma. My dog was sneezing." The chief paused. "Your dog was sneezing?" "Yes," she snapped. "And your officer laughed at me when I told him that. That's unprofessional." "Karen," he said, "you've made over 15 calls to our station in the past 3 months. 4 of those calls were about noises that turned out to be crickets. One was about a Halloween decoration you thought was a real body. One was because someone's wind chimes annoyed you. And now, this." I watched her shrink a little in her stance. She was still standing, but her voice had lost its strength. She didn't know what to say now. She was cornered, but not in a hostile way, just in a way where the truth was out, and there wasn't anywhere left to push. "I'm warning you," the chief continued, his voice low but clear. "If you make one more false call to this department, especially one that wastes emergency resources, you will face consequences. Do you understand that?" She mumbled something under her breath, and then, without another word, turned and marched back through the gate she had barged through minutes ago, and just like that, Karen was gone. The moment she left, the backyard seemed to breathe again. It was like someone had turned the lights back on. Conversations resumed, music played, and the scent of the fire pit returned to fill the air instead of tension. The chief turned to me and grinned. "Sorry about that. She's a piece of work." I laughed. "She's persistent. I'll give her that." He raised his plate again. "These ribs are incredible, by the way. Who made them?" "My uncle," I said, pointing toward the older man, flipping more meat on the grill. "He's been barbecuing since the 70s. Says he's got his secret marinade recipe and never tells anyone." The chief chuckled. "Well, he's doing God's work out here." As the officers mingled with the guests, a few of my friends came up to me and clapped me on the back. "Man, that was wild," one of them said. "I thought she was gonna call in the SWAT team." "I wouldn't put it past her," I said. "But it's over now, hopefully for good." It was then that one of the officers came over to me with a soft smile. "Hey," she said, "don't worry about her. We deal with people like that all the time. You handled it really well. Thanks, I replied. I was actually starting to wonder if I should even keep doing these BBQs. No way, she said. This is exactly the kind of community gathering we need more of. You keep doing your thing. We've got your back. That meant more than I could say. As the sun began to set, the sky turned a soft orange and pink, casting warm light over the whole backyard. Kids were playing tag again, the fire pit crackled gently, and music played softly. The chief and the other officers eventually left, waving and thanking us for the food. Before leaving, the chief turned and said, "If you ever get any more trouble from Karen, you know where to find us." Later that night, as I cleaned up, my uncle came up beside me, still wiping his hands from the grill. "That woman's got a storm in her, doesn't she?" "She's something else," I laughed. He nodded. "But she can't stop good people from coming together. Let her try." I looked around at the backyard now empty, the fire pit slowly dying down, the scent of charcoal and meat still hanging in the air. My phone buzzed with messages. Friends thanking me, pictures being shared, and one message from someone I didn't know. "Hey, I live a few houses down. Saw the commotion earlier. Looked like you were throwing a good time. Mind if I join next time?" I smiled, because that's what it's really about. Not the drama, not the neighbors who want to cause trouble, but the ones who see the community, who want to be part of something warm, welcoming, and real. Karen may have called the police on my fire pit, but the police ended up staying for the party, and that's one BBQ I'll never forget.